Well, I was born and raised in the Coptic Orthodox Church. So the Coptic Orthodox Church is part of the Oriental Orthodox Church. But being in that world, I spent 32 years of my life, most of it, in the Orthodox Church. My parents aren't even the ones who named me. My parents actually had trouble having a child, so they actually went to the church. They wrote different letters to different people. And my brother and I are actually named by a monk because he prayed over us and so forth. And if you look at our family, they were very much ingrained in the church. Their daily life was a part of the church. We would have multiple priests that would come to our home, bishops. All of them would come to our home and spend time with us there. I had developed something called an Orthodox Veronima. That is an Orthodox worldview, an Orthodox way of viewing the world. My dad served as a deacon or a diakon, which is in the Orthodox Church considered like a half priest. I served as a Sunday school teacher. I served in multiple Orthodox churches in that way. Me and my brother, we served as in the Coptic Church, it was called a deacon or a reader. The Eastern Orthodox would call it as a reader, which is like an altar boy in Roman Catholicism. We used to have local churches that were being planted in our area. They would perform their services at our home because we had a room that was in our house. It used to be a hallway. They closed it off and they closed off the closet and they made it into a room where we kept, objects that would be considered holy there, and including when they wanted to have church services, they would have it in that room. And also, when they were trying to plant a local church, they would take the altar items and keep it at our house there. So we had a lot of services that were in our house. My aunt used to make the fabric that goes around relics. We ourselves as a family had many different relics, which were clothing of the saints, not body parts or anything, but clothing of the saints that would be given to my parents as a gift. So we had a lot of those. Growing up, I took an Orthodox course that would be considered seminary credit if I went into an Orthodox seminary if I wanted to use it. So I had a good understanding of what Orthodoxy taught. I even at one point was writing homilies and messages that would be about the saints that I would give to our local priest that he would sometimes use in his sermons or use it while visiting other people in this congregation. I even considered, because I loved art, making icons and the study of that, because that was a whole entire process. So really, I could say that I was truly the Orthodox of Orthodox, just like Paul says, I'm a Pharisee of Pharisees. I was an Orthodox of Orthodox. I did all the different prayers you could do. I was working so hard, and then I just became so tired. Just so tired of just working constantly. I was working to earn my salvation, never feeling secure at all. I was really trying to find myself approved by other people because, again, there was no assurance of my salvation. So I just wanted to hear people continue to look at what I was doing. My heart was in the wrong place. Oftentimes, the leaders in the church, what they were doing is they were using allegorical interpretation to teach the Bible. So a story about the prodigal son was actually a story about the liturgy and how it's all related to that. And once you realize that there's no way I can come up with that knowledge on my own, well, then what was the point of going to the scriptures? Let me just go to the priest and ask him, what does this mean? Because I would never know what that means, which is very much a lot like Gnosticism, the secret knowledge, for example, that they had. And again, the true gospel was never presented to me. The most of our teachings are oftentimes focused on the saints. It focused on here's the liturgical practices and here's the reason why we do it. Again, a lot of people find that fascinating. Oh, look, here's the reasons why we do it. But then when you study church history, you realize it's not necessarily ancient. Yes, they're basing it off of different things. Sometimes they're basing it off of things on the Old Testament, but the practice itself is actually a new practice that was an accretion later on that was added in. But they will present it that this is exactly how the apostles worshiped. So really what you saw there was you had a group of people who were malnourished because they weren't receiving biblical truth. I've spoken to many people who spent 70 years in the church and they became born again. And they're like, in the last year, I've learned more than the 70 years that I've been in the church. In fact, a great testimony is that was my father. He spent so many years in the church. When he became born again, in just a few years, he learned more than all he had learned in the church this whole time. And he served as a deacon, and he was going into the Coptic seminary to learn the things he needed to learn to serve. But by God's grace, started reading a little bit in scripture and started to notice that some of the things that was claimed that was in scripture wasn't really there. And that really started me to question the church, start to question the veneration of saints and all this. But I was church hopping and struggling to find what was truth. I was praying oftentimes, what is truth, Lord? I want to find truth. But in my heart, I wasn't really truly ready to surrender at that point. But by God's grace, I ended up moving to Texas. Things were getting very liberal in the area we were going in, and we had our second daughter, and we wanted to raise them in a place that we felt was conservative and everything, and a great place to have a family. And we didn't have any family or friends there, but just Texas seemed appealing. So I said, Lord, I've been struggling with this. If you just find me a church that's teaching whatever truth you want me to learn, I'll move the whole family there. And we went and we visited Texas, and I saw a different attitude in the people there. They're very kind. But then we visited a church there, and they were teaching the gospel, and I was blown away. I was like, wow, this is what we've been looking for. And now when I look back at the church, I disagree with some of their secondary doctrines, but they were actually teaching the actual gospel. And within 3 months, I became born again, and started to just devour the scriptures and see the hope and what it meant to be truly born again when I look at Romans 10:9, 10. Because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved. That truth was lost upon me for 32 years in that church. Even though I would go there regularly and serve there regularly, that was lost on me. But once I came to understand that truth, that I had to surrender to him and then my life would be changed, my whole entire life completely changed. I was going to go originally for my MBA. I had a marketing and graphic design background. But then once I was saved, I realized that the Lord was calling me to share God's truth with others. When I was a kid, the priest would think that I was going to become a priest one day. But the reality is, God called me to serve him, to preach his word and to preach the gospel. That led me into my journey into seminary, and then eventually serving as a youth pastor, and now a pastor here in Western New York and serving in village missions. So it was an amazing journey, but God had compassion on me because I was looking everywhere, and the church itself just did not give the gospel message. And that is the fear of people getting into this, that they're exchanging the truth of the gospel to go into a church like the Orthodox Church.